Imagine not being able to read the paper because your hands were shaking. Imagine not being able to read newsprint as your world faded to black. The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. With your host, Lee Martin, and co-host, Florence Myers-McSwine.
Well, welcome back to this week's National Federation of the Blind Newsline Indiana show. We are excited again to have a very special guest from last week's show. But first, we want to talk just a little bit about the NFB Newsline.
Yes, and we want you to know it is a free service for those that are print challenged, and that includes people with certain forms of dyslexia. The deaf-blind community now can utilize this free service. And we want to thank our Talking Book and Braille Library Services and those individuals that are in Baltimore to help keep this service moving along. We also want to tell you about a new feature to the service that we have with the Amazon Alexa and Dot. It is a very hands-off type of feature that allows individuals just to speak to the Amazon Alexa or Dot and get your newspapers and magazines and publications that you are seeking. It is a very good tool. You can go to our website, pay attention to our commercials, and you can give us a call, and we can direct you on and instruct you on how to use that or send you out the necessary materials. So stay tuned for our show with Ms. Susan Jones as we continue our conversation with her.
With my failing eyesight, I'm not able to read regular newspapers, and I'm not able to keep up with obituaries.
I've been a homemaker all of my life, but since my vision has failed, I wish I could read my favorite magazines.
Have you heard of the NFB Newsline?
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Subscribe free to NFB Newsline today.
If you or someone you know is visually impaired or print challenged, the National Federation of the Blind has a resource you need.
I use NFB Newsline when reading Hammond Northwest Times.
Using NFB Newsline, I read the Christian Science magazine.
Dad, you read your Jerusalem Post too.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Live the life you want. Read NFB Newsline.
It's free.
We want to welcome you back to the National Federation of the Blind Newsline Indiana show. And we have a continued show with our guest, Ms. Susan Jones. And Susan, we just want to thank you once again for coming on to the show to talk about so many issues that are valuable to you, and the information that you share reach hundreds and hundreds of people that watch our show. So thank you once again for a continued show with us here on the NFB Newsline.
I'm glad to be here.
Now, Susan, we left off talking about service animals and also transportation. You've had several service animals or one service animal?
I have had actually 6 guide dogs in my lifetime. I haven't had guide dogs continuously. I've traveled with a cane a fair amount. But I just retired Liza, my 6th guide dog, and she is having a happy life with a young couple who have a big yard, and she can run and play and do whatever she wants to do. And so I am awaiting her successor.
Okay, now Susan, I want to ask you, you've had 6 guide dogs. I know you have to have some emotional ties to these guide dogs while you have them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so
yeah.
I know that sometimes it's got to be hard sometimes.
It is, yeah. Yeah, and the transition is always emotional. But, you know, unfortunately, dogs don't live as long as humans, and we kind of have to accept that and move on and, you know, kind of hold things lightly. And I figure I don't own my guide dogs technically. I mean, I do. I feed them. They're mine. Mm-hmm. But God owns it all, and I don't take that lightly. But I do hold my relationships with my guide dogs lightly, in the sense that you know, God is the one I depend on, mm-hmm. and my guide dogs are a help.
Now tell me, Susan, there may be some individuals that are wanting to know, how would they go about acquiring a guide dog?
Well, there are several schools. There are about 10 or 12 schools in the United States, so you can Google and find out. I've been getting my dogs lately from Guiding Eyes for the Blind in New York. I think it's a great school, but everybody has their preferences. And so interested people can go on the web and find out and do their research. Usually the guide dogs and the services that come with them are free, except you pretty much pay for your own vet expenses and things like that.
Okay, with
Food.
I'm sorry. With your retiring, Liza, what is the process now for your getting another guide dog?
Well, I have made application, and it's just a matter of waiting my turn and waiting till they have the right dog with the right pace and pull for me and the right temperament.
So there's that process. I'm trying to figure out, how do they match you with that, the service animal?
Someone from the school comes and spends time with me in my home, like maybe an hour or so, and we go out and walk. In the case of when I had Liza, I went out and walked with her a little while, about 6 or 8 blocks, and they had a chance to watch and videotape and figure out how fast I like to walk and what my tone of voice was like, and you know, the other things that they could observe about me and how I work with my dogs. And if you've never had a guide dog before, or you don't have a dog at the moment, they do what they call a Juno Walk, which means the instructor holds the other end of the harness and you hold the harness handle and the leash just as if you were walking with a dog, and you give the commands like forward, left, right. And they try out different paces to see how fast you can walk, and they want to know how much of a correction you can give, how strong you are. And those things influence the kind of dog that you get. Also, they will want to know what kind of an environment you live in, whether it's urban or rural or suburban. And they try to match the dog with the dog's preferences with the needs of the person.
I find that to be very interesting, because we were at one convention and an individual had a small pony as a service animal. I think that was in the Detroit area. When we went to Detroit, they had a small pony that they were using.
Yes, I remember that.
And also, I was watching a television show, and the little people, I hope I'm saying that correct, they also had established a group that would want to take the place of a service animal, simply because they felt like the human connection would be better for some people. I found that to be very interesting too. You could probably Google that one up. So if you're interested in the little people as service attendants to the blind, and the blind individuals throughout the country. You might Google that one up. I found that to be very interesting.
I think for myself, I would rather have an animal because if I had a human being, they want to be free. They want to do things. I don't want to have a slave.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not what I do. I don't want to impose on somebody. They have their life that they need to live too. So.
Well, they were definitely doing it for a fee.
Oh,
large
I'm
fee.
sure.
So, so that was very interesting.
My dogs are very satisfied with dog food and praise and affection for pay.
Now, what is the general age of guide dogs when they're matched with their?
They're usually about between 1.5 and 2 years old. Sometimes they can be older, especially if the person has special needs that the dog needs to be trained for. Then they might be 3 or 4. And they usually work till they're about 9 or 10. It just depends on the health of the dog and the willingness of the dog to do the work and the kind of lifestyle that the person leads.
Now, we're talking about lifestyles. I know that you do a lot of traveling. You're a very religious person. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the travels and the works and the volunteerism that you do. I find it to be very interesting. Can you talk to us a little bit about your travels?
Well, when I retired, I took it as my ticket to do the volunteering that I wanted to do that I never had time to do when I was working. So I'm a community volunteer. I do a lot of volunteering here in Indianapolis, but I also occasionally will take trips overseas. Now, I don't take my dogs with me. Some people would. It's just not in my comfort zone to do that. But I've gone to a lot of countries with Compassion International. I sponsor several children with Compassion right now. I have 4. And so I've been to Ecuador and Haiti and Honduras and Peru, and I went to the Philippines with an organization called Resources for the Blind International, RBI. And so I've had an opportunity, and it's been a blessing to be able to travel to several places and to encourage children in their struggles and their talents and abilities, to develop them to grow.
It is so interesting. We're going to take a short break and come back to talk a little bit more about how Susan Jones does not allow blindness to hold her back. So stay tuned.
If you or someone you know is visually impaired or print challenged, the National Federation of the Blind has a resource you need.
Wow, I scored a touchdown when I found sports on NFB Newsline.
I enjoy reading TV guide listings on NFB Newsline.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
We are the nation's blind. We read NFB Newsline.
It's free.
With my failing eyesight, I'm not able to read regular newspapers, and I'm not able to keep up with obituaries.
I've been a homemaker all of my life, but since my vision has failed, I wish I could read my favorite magazines.
Have you heard of the NFB Newsline?
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Subscribe free to NFB Newsline today. Welcome back to the National Federation of the Blind Newsline show, where we have our guest, Miss Susan Jones. And we're talking and having great conversation with Miss Susan Jones. And we left off talking about how she does not allow blindness to hold her back. Susan, let's talk about some of the things that you do. I know you love to exercise, you love to travel. Just tell us a little bit more about Miss Susan Jones.
Well, my typical day is 3 days a week I go to the Y and do water exercise. And I volunteer in the K through 8 school that's a block from my house. And I sing in my church choir. I read books to kids. I have print Braille picture books. They are books that are regular print books that they have cut apart and put clear plastic Braille pages in between so that I can read to the children so that they can see the pictures as well as hear me read. So this summer I'm reading to the 5 and 6 year olds at the Mary Rigg Neighborhood Center day camp once a week.
Wow. And I know they're going to love it as we do. I'm an adult, but I've heard you read stories, Susan, and we love what you do.
Oh, man.
Well, I think everybody has a little bit of child in them, so everybody enjoys stories. So I try to choose some that are rich in language and rich in content and emotion and very enjoyable to read.
Now, I've heard you recite a lot, and you have anything you can recite quickly? You got anything in there that you can tell us or share with us? Just to give us an example.
Oh, gosh.
A taste.
Well, I can tell you that my life verse is Psalm 34:1. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall always be in my mouth.
It's one of my favorites.
I have 2 favorite sayings. One of them is choose joy. We have lots of choices we can make in life, but joy is the one we should choose. And really, the joy of the Lord is my strength. And my other favorite saying is, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Now, live in such a way that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice.
Wow. So you've been blind all your life.
Yes.
And you have just, you have so much value. I mean, you've been a social worker. You've overcome the 70% unemployment rate within the blind and disabled communities. You're a cane traveler. You use a service animal when necessary. And you traveled the world. So your blindness doesn't define you or your future. And no, you said you've traveled to Haiti. Let's repeat some of those places you've traveled to again.
Well, I've been to Ecuador, Haiti, Peru, Honduras. I studied in Costa Rica when I was in college. I went to the Philippines in 2010. I've been in many places.
Mind you, viewers and listeners, that she's been blind all her life, and what a success. Now, you have to overcome a lot of different other hurdles as we, as National Federationists and a community of advocates, know that we have fair labor laws that are antiquated. One of them is the Certificate of 14C. You want to talk about that a little bit?
It is just not fair that people who are blind or disabled because of their blindness or disability should be treated as a commodity and receive less than the minimum wage. Everybody who works at a job should be paid at least the minimum wage. Blindness should not be a reason, or a handicap, a disability should not be a reason to pay someone less than the minimum wage. and to say, oh, well, it's just socialization. They're not really working. Hogwash.
That is a great word there, hogwash. Okay. Now, let's go into another issue that we have, parenting rights. Give us your purview on that.
Well, I have to be honest with you and say I've always been single. I've never been a parent, but I have taken care of children, and I know many blind people who very capably care for and raise their children. And it is not fair for social workers and other people to assume, medical personnel, to assume that because a mother or a father is blind, that they are incapable of taking care of their children. Just because you do things with sight doesn't mean everybody has to. There are other ways of doing things, very effective ways, that don't require sight. And so I would encourage medical and social personnel to learn about the capabilities of blind people, and do not assume that a blind parent, because of blindness, cannot take care of a child.
Now, Susan, now you have you use technology a lot, and how do you keep yourself up on the technology as it becomes available to the blind community?
Well, I try to research it and learn what I can. I'm not a big fan of technology, and yet I am. I find it very useful, but it is not my long suit. I would rather spend time with people. I would rather, I would rather be traveling somewhere. But my mother always said, the turtle moves by sticking its neck out. So you have to put yourself out there and learn a few things from time to time. Like right now, I'm switching over from Internet Explorer, which is basically a dead internet browser, to Google Chrome. And it's taken me a while to get the courage to do it, but I found somebody who can help me, and I am doing it by God's grace.
Wow, and with technology, since you mentioned that question there, even with the curve of learning how to use the Amazon devices with NFB Newsline, it's a small learning curve to just speak to the Alexa and the Dot to get the information that you require out of it. But everything seems to come with a learning curve. Now, we know that we spoke on the unemployment, the 70% unemployment, they want to call it fair wage, but it's not fair. And we want to talk about affordability of technology. We have the Access Technology Affordability Act. Let's talk about that a little bit, Florence. You want to start that out, Florence?
Yes, Lee. Now we know, because of the unemployment rate for blind individuals being excess of 70%, a lot of people cannot afford the technology. Our technology, as you know, Susan, is pretty expensive, ranging from $200 to $2,200, and even more than that. And it's pretty expensive, and what we're asking is that legislatures look into that and give a tax credit to us who need the technology. I mean, basically for everyday life. And there's technology such as, the screen readers, JAWS for people, JAWS, the screen reader, and also the screen magnifier for those who still have some usable vision, are pretty expensive. And how do you feel about the Access Technology Affordability Act?
Well, I think this is very important because particularly if a blind person wants to stay employable, and we actually are talking about not just blind people, but disabled people who require technology. But as a blind person, it was very important to me, especially when I was working, to keep my skills up. And if I didn't have the technology at home to practice on every day, it would have been much more difficult for me to use what I had to use at work, to juggle all that technology stuff. So it's very important for us to be able to purchase our own technology to and get a tax credit for it to help us to stay abreast of all the new technology.
Okay, well, we're going to take us a short pause and come back with the conclusion of our show. Time goes by so fast.
It does.
So we'll be right back, so stay tuned.
The National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. You can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back.
I want to welcome back to the conclusion of the National Federation of the Blind Newsline show. Susan, thank you so very much for coming out and sharing once again with us your life and your intuitiveness about life itself and not allowing anything to hold you back. I certainly have enjoyed having you here. And Florence, it's been a great show once again.
It has.
So, Susan.
Yes.
Give us some parting words here for our listening and viewing audience, please.
I just want to say, first of all, it's been a real pleasure being on your show. Secondly, if you, the viewer, are facing loss of sight, loss of eyesight, or you know somebody who is, you have a child, or you know somebody who has a child who is, or seniors who are losing vision, contact the National Federation of the Blind. You will be empowered because you will meet successful blind people at all stages of the vision loss journey, the sight loss journey, I should say. We try and keep our vision even as we lose our sight.
Amen.
So we are here to encourage you. We are here to help you. We are here to tell you that you can live the life you want.
And blindness does not hold you back.
Absolutely.
So we enjoy with you today. And once again, thank you very much. Come back with us next week, and we'll guarantee you we'll have another great guest. Thank you very much. And once again, be blessed.
The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. For more information, go to nfb-in.org or call 855-963-6476. That's 855-963-6476. The National Federation of the Blind encourages you to live the life you want.